Welcome back to the Outcast Haven podcast. No fun intro tonight. Jason's son, I guess, had to go to the hospital. He was playing. I'm laughing. I don't actually think it's funny, but he might have broke his hand playing sports balls and stuff. So he is not joining us, but we do still have some fun stuff to talk about tonight. Just going to be myself and Blake. We've got the news about the actual pro play OP structure, which is super exciting. Lots to talk about with the meta, so stay tuned for the rest of the podcast. Yeah, it's been a minute since I've done a true cold open.
Yeah, that's usually Jason's job.
I get all podcasts get warmed up. Jason just comes in hard at the beginning. No, so Blake, I know you shared the organized play article with our group today. What are your initial thoughts? Is it what you thought it was going to be? Is it more? Is it not quite what you were hoping for? What are you thinking?
I mean, honestly, it's everything I was hoping for and more, because it's really well structured. It's really well thought out. It's very clear and concise. I think a lot of games come in with a big plan to do these things, but I'll say so far, the thing that's impressed me most about LSS and Flesh and Blood is the fact that a lot of games, what they do is they make a lot of promises, and then they often fall short of the promises. They do that classic, promise big. It's over, oh God, what's this saying?
It's you want to under promise, over perform.
There you go. Yeah.
But oftentimes it's the opposite.
Yeah. LSS is most companies, they over promise and underperform. That's the classic structure in TCGs. They tell you something great is going to happen, and then they let invites fall through the cracks for this event, or they don't host these events as well as they should be. They don't set them up as well as they should.
Fantasy Flight.
Yeah. I mean, I still have a Worlds invite I earned. When am I going to get to use that? Are they going to redeem it for can I redeem that in a different game? Or how does that work?
Worlds is still coming, man. It's still coming.
It's all on the boat. Any former Destiny players will laugh at that and
it's
cry
on
at
the boat.
Time. On the boat. But I think what LSS has done really well is they wait to tell you what's going to happen until they actually have a plan, and they actually have the ability to fulfill what they're telling you they have planned. So, with skirmishes, we wanted online events forever. They waited, and then as soon as they did it and announced it, it was amazing because they had planned it out well. So I'm confident that they've taken their time on this. They have it really well structured out and really set up. So I'm excited for it. I'm excited to have an opportunity. They seem like they've got a good setup on the tier structure where there's some really healthy opportunities for people to have a more casual opportunity to enter, or it's more open to people. And then there's other events that are your opportunity to kind of show your grit. You get to show how much you've been grinding and pushing to get yourself prepped for these events.
Yep. Since it's just you and I'm just going to take the time, but I'm going to up on screen right now. If you're watching on YouTube, we've actually got the OP breakdown. So there's the 4 tiers. Blake, you've got it up in front of you too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So tier 1, you've got the skirmish, the typical locals events, right? Your play anywhere, on demand, your armor events, and the skirmish. Then tier 2, you've got Pro Quest and Road to Nationals. And Road to Nationals is the first place that we see the PTI availability, the Pro Tour invite, right? Is that what that's what PTI stands for, right? Yep.
So Pro Tour invitation.
Yep. So that's the Road to Nationals is your first opportunity to earn that. Blake, is that top 8?
Yes, top 8 earns a Pro Tour invitation with the at the Road to National events.
And then you've got tier 3, which is your callings and national championships. And callings, do you earn? Right, you earn there, and then you need to cash in for the championship.
Yep. So callings, you can earn your PTI. But that's an open tournament. So that's the open entry professional level tournament. So they kind of framed that as the opportunity where you don't have to have a PTI to get into it. You can earn one out of it. So that's kind of like the open invitation where anybody can show up and have their opportunity to earn their PTI. However, at the national championship, you actually have to have your PTI to be able to play in that. So callings and road to nationals are like your chance to get into the national championships. And it's interesting because the PTI setup is it's basically a token that can be used for any future national championship, world championship, or pro tour event, which is cool because it means like if you can't go to the next thing, you don't lose your invite, which is kind of one of the things that a lot of games do is, you know, you earn your road to nationals thing and then something comes up in life and you can't make that national. It's kind of a bummer that now it just kind of disappears into the ether. Whereas LSS is basically saying like, hey, you can save it. Like you can kind of stash that away and then use it for a different pro tour event.
Right. Which is cool. I don't see any reason why you wouldn't be able to do that. That always kind of confused me in other games. I mean, the meta changes so often in between anyway. So it's like, yeah, you're never playing on the same meta that you earned your invite in when you are actually playing at the nationals or whatever it is. Right.
So like not going to the event. It's not like you're dodging a meta that you're not good in. You're probably like it's probably just a different meta, or even if it's the same meta, like you would have won your event on that meta. So why would you dodge it? Like,
and then tier 4, you've got the Pro Tour and the World Championship. So I'm already excited for the World Championship. That's going to be we're going to get there. That's our goal, right? Like we want to be players that are at that caliber, but like just the fact that it exists excites me because there's been like the nationals, like talking about nationals and callings and all this stuff about traveling to different places to play in them. But like this is it. There's the worlds. We're going to have worlds.
Yeah. I think even the fact that they mentioned there's like an actual pro tour that they are aiming to have set up where it's not just playing nationals then go to the worlds. It's like no. Hey, on top of that, there's going to be a pro tour that we aim to set up. Now they do note in the thing that tier 1 through 3 they intend to start in 2021. Tier 4 they're aiming to start running that tier in 2022. So that's like the future thing. So obviously you need to kind of build a tournament structure, which I think is the right way to do it, because you don't want your first world championships as a game. It doesn't have to be right away, especially right now, right? We'll be 2 years into the game probably before there's like a US championship, like a national championship. We'll be almost 2 years into the game at that point. So with that being the case, like what's the rush to get into a world championships? Let the game grow. Right. And let your first worlds truly be a celebration of the game. There's no reason to rush to a world championships this year because you'd rather worlds be a bigger deal and have more opportunities for people to earn their invites anyway. Like you don't want worlds to be 50 people like that. You know, like 50 people show up to worlds. You're like, wow, what an incredible thing. Let's write an article about this in magazines. Like everyone's going to be talking about this.
I mean, worlds in theory is going to be in New Zealand, right? And if they held it in New Zealand, they're getting more than 50 people because that's where all that's where all the callings and literally everything has been basically. So
they
would get there.
Well, and then
one way or another, but
and then everybody from the rest of the world is excited to go to New Zealand because number 1, we get to meet all these people that we've played with. Number 2, we get to play high level. And number 3, anybody who's anybody will absolutely be all about that Lord of the Rings, tour life. I need to see that set, right? Like I need to go to the Shire. If I'm going to New Zealand, I'm going to the Shire, baby. Like,
yeah, I almost convinced Chelsea to look at honeymoon there. So I'm getting married this summer. And I was like, we should, New Zealand's really pretty. She's a huge Lord of the Rings fan. I was like, it'd be really fun honeymoon. And just like the whole time, like I'll be able to swing by LSS, meet all these people we've been chatting with. And it's all right. We're looking at someplace tropical now. So
there you go. I mean, we've already been talking about the fact that we're going to kind of tuck away some money a little bit here and there, because if I'm going to Worlds, we're making it a family vacation. It's the whole family's going. So
I would immediately lose my nuts if I tried to go to New Zealand without family. So no, it'll be fun. It'll be a good time. And that is in the cards. We need to do that. So yep. Any other thoughts on like the OP program as a whole? I mean, I think it is pretty much. The only thing is I really hope that we start to see some sort of like, I'm going to say structure. I mean, like actually implemented structure. Cause like we've had a calling in the United States and Texas in like 2019, right?
Yeah,
Like,
there was like a calling before everything shut down.
right. And like, granted, that was before the shutdown. So a lot of stuff has changed. There's been decent structure to the skirmish events, like a set time frame. I would love to see like some sort of schedule or like how they're actually going to structure out. Like we run Road to Nationals quarterly with a national championship once a year, and we run the callings like bi-yearly or whatever, like, and just like see that laid out. I would love to see how it's actually all going to be laid out.
Yeah. I know they're big on the season mindset, so it's like season 1, season 2, and that.
Yeah.
I think that's a cool way to frame it. But yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I'm excited to see exactly how it's laid out. I assume that if they went through all the trouble to lay out the diagrams and describe all this stuff, that we're eventually going to see a really well fleshed out schedule. Because you know that once, one of the big things that we have in the States, especially, and I'm sure other places have it too, but the United States is huge. Like it's a huge like land mass. So traveling isn't driving a few hours or a quick, flight. Like we have significant travel plans that have to be made, like East Coast to West Coast. We're kind of lucky being in the middle, like being in Minnesota, we have a little bit easier access to everything. Like we're probably not, unless they host it in Minnesota or Chicago, where we're going to be a pretty decent flight, but it's kind of the same everywhere versus like somebody who's on the West Coast, you probably have to give them some time because you're basically, most of a day of travel to get to the East Coast for them. So
yeah, no, I mean, and just plug this here now, like Chicago would be a great place to host something like this. It's a national
Minneapolis
hub.
would be really good too.
Minneapolis is pretty, like, thrown in a word. I mean, there's been worlds for other games held here that have hosted 500 plus people successfully, multiple games. It's been good.
International airport.
We do
international airport.
I mean, lots of international airports. All international airport means is that it can connect to an airport that can fly internationally. So that airport doesn't even need to be able to fly internationally. As long as it can connect to an airport that can fly internationally, it's considered an international airport. Fun fact.
I know too. We also have a lot of Canadian players. I'm just saying Minnesota is probably the most Canadian friendly place to host an event. I'm just like for all of our Canadian friends. So
right, that's fair. No, I mean,
if you host it here, just a quick shout out too. If you host it here, please really quick, like shoot us like an email. Like we're happy to like advise time frame. For the love of God, please do not host an event here in like December. It'd be terrible because we are then only the Canadians would come. Nobody else would come see it.
And we'd be like, we can't drive. There's like 1.5 inches of snow. And we're like, what? Okay.
That's the secret spice. The Southerners come up here for a tournament in December, but then they get trapped in their hotels because they can't drive their rental cars.
That's true. All right. So moving on from the OP program here. What's new in testing? What do we got? What have you been running with? I know you initially took on the lion's share of the old deck piloting so that me and Jason could basically run our heads against the gambit of the old tried and trues, right? So what are you currently playing? What are you looking at playing of the new decks? Or what do you think, honestly, in this, what meta is going to emerge is going to be your deck of choice?
Yeah, I mean, I think in Classic Constructed that it's kind of
I'm just going to stop you right there.
Yep.
Especially after the announcement of this OP program. Respect Blitz, understand there's lots of people interested in like what Blitz is doing, like like builds and stuff like that. And we'll get around and we'll probably play some Blitz. Like last live stream we played some Blitz. But Classic Constructed is like the thing in Flesh and Blood, right? Like that's the big boy game. That's where you actually take into account a lot of your sideboard swaps for different matchups, how you got to actually understand what your opponent's deck is trying to do. So that's what we're going to be focusing on. And when we say things without specifying Classic Constructed or Blitz, 98% of the time we're talking Classic Constructed. So anyways, Comment
Yeah,
down
no.
below if you hate that, and we'll ignore it.
Yeah, I mean, I think with skirmishes and stuff, people are going to want to know some blitz stuff. And I've been messing with some blitz decks and playing around. Like I've got a Bolton Axes blitz deck that's been feeling pretty good. Like I've been feeling that deck out, and it's got a really explosive turn. But I also think that that's part of what makes blitz is that you can have like one explosive turn. You can build your deck around one explosive turn, and that's all you need. So when it comes to classic constructed, you can't build around an explosive turn to win you the game because 40 health is too much to get in an explosive turn. So in classic constructed playing, I mean, I like playing Chain and I like playing Prism, which kind of works out because those seem to be the decks that are the strongest. I'm going to try and transition my Bolton deck into a classic constructed deck and see if it's viable and conceptually, if the same idea is viable. It's a little harder because you are trying to have like one or two explosive turns to basically win you the game. But I'm interested in trying it just because I do like Bolton's mechanics. I like that he's different than Dorinthia because like she's challenging the block because of her reprise effect. So you have to be careful because she really leans on reprise as her mechanic. So like that's where she creates this difficulty in blocking. Whereas with Bolton, it's charge something and then make sure that whatever they block with becomes problematic. Like you now have to look at your hand and potentially manipulate your block values in your next turn a little bit. Otherwise, you give Bolton go again, especially when there's those turns with Bolton where you just play something that doesn't have go again, right? Or you play take flight into something else and that other thing doesn't have go again, but you've charged. So now your opponent has to look at their hand and think to themselves, do I just take the 2 or 3? Because if I block with a card, I go minus a card, and then I potentially buff their attack and I take an extra damage anyway. And it kind of creates this like weird blocking situation, which is funny enough. Like warriors are supposed to be based around their weapons. Like that's kind of the mechanic that like warriors are supposed to lean on is their weapon heavy. And what I think I've found the most in playing Bolton and Dorinthia is that what warriors are actually kind of built around is like being a pain to block because they're just the most challenging to block class in the game.
Yeah, I think that playing into Bolton, it feels like the same block challenge, but just like the elementary school version. It's like I just take this 2 or this 3. Okay, cool. I just do that. And you can't give it go again. Like there's no Bolton equivalent of a twinning blade that does something spicy. You know what I mean? Like he doesn't have, he literally has glint, right? But I don't know. It's weird because Bolton just feels easier to deal with. And I think he is, but he is still a pain to block. There's just, I feel like it's so weird because I built a list for Bolton and I just wanted to build him like Dorinthia. And it's like at that point, it's like, why aren't you just running Dorinthia?
I think that
does it better.
Yeah, the challenge with Bolton is he kind of becomes like this. You're trying to have two competing strategies. Like that's the thing that I've talked about with people is that like in this game, most decks have like one strategy. Like other games have archetypes. This game has kind of defined archetypes in their class structure, but then inside of that, most decks have a pretty specific strategy that they kind of focus on as their primary win con. With Dorinthia, everything is based around the Dawnblade. Like it's just how do I make this deck function around the Dawnblade? With Kano, it's obviously throwing arcane damage. With Ira specifically, it's interesting. With Ira, it's very much a value game. You're outvaluing your opponent. Whereas with Katsu, even though they're both ninjas and they're both kind of doing the same thing where it's like ping, ping, attack, Katsu is very combo dependent and relies heavily on building correct combos and pitching away the right cards and discarding the right cards and blocking with the right cards to set up these big combo things. And I think a lot of decks have like the strategy that they're really trying to focus on. And the issue with Bolton so far that I found in testing him and playing him is finding a world where you aren't sacrificing the weapon value for the charge value or the charge value for the weapon value. It's like both but it's hard to fit two strategies into one deck and not have turns where it feels clunky.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I feel like when you look at those two strategies that you're talking about, I want to just run him charge build and say, how can I make the charge build good? Because if you're running him weapon build, attack reaction build, like just run Dorinthia in my brain.
Yeah.
So but I think that maybe where he succeeds in the build that I'm actually looking at now for Classic Constructed is axes, but with the attack reactions and like splashing in those attacks, like just maybe even just the full series of take flights that give the go again, right? Just let yourself build, because then you've got kind of the on command. As long as you have attack reactions, you've got kind of the on command go again, which Dorinthia doesn't have. Dorinthia needs to find that go again. So that right there is a thing that Boltyn offers that Dorinthia doesn't, is through the course of the game, just playing maybe normally what you would play anyways, you're building up some charge targets or some charges in your soul, right? And then on the turn that you blank on the hit and run, right? You don't draw it. You need to go again. You just need to put on pressure with the axes. You've got it. Just be able to buff your soul, or buff your attack, because theoretically, if you're running like an attack reaction heavy, almost Dorinthia-esque build, you're going to be able to plus that axe and then give it go again with the soul you built up. And there's your go again on a stick. So
yeah. I mean, the build that I've been messing with Boltyn has been with axes, but then I have kind of emphasized like building basically around the axes. Like the axes is the strategy and the charge is something that is like the facilitator for it. So running the full set of take flights and then just running things that actually add some value to the deck, because I think at first, like they run things, people were running like Charge the Line or whatever that card is, or Express Lightning. And the only issue I have with those cards is they don't incentivize your opponent to block them, so they don't actually hinder your opponent's turn. So what you're theoretically doing is like take flight, go again into one of those things, hoping that you have two cards in hand and you can charge them both. Whereas I think that the cards that actually are really good are like Engulfing Light, where you can either take flight into axe and then maybe another axe, depending on what's in your hand and how your turn fleshed out. Because one of the things that's really interesting is that you can also like sequence it differently, where you can hit and run to give go again, or I run glint just because a lot of people will block casually the two. So you can glint to get the reprise and the go again. So you basically replace it when you give the card to go again, which is really good because, again, like it's not a card that I think people associate with Boltyn. But the key is that like the hit and run trigger actually buffs any attack if you swung with a weapon before. So the next weapon attack gets go again, but then if you swung with a weapon, the next attack gets plus whatever the color is. So you won't give your card go again, but if you're finishing with a card like Engulfing Light, that's a 1 or a 2 or a 3, depending on which color it is, it's free. The benefit to that card now becomes, if you swing with your axe, you don't give it go again, but you give it +3, making it a 3, 4, or 5. And if it hits, you draw a card. So you're effectively telling your opponent, if you let any of this hit, I now get to draw a card, and you basically are giving me a free arsenal, which is something that Boltyn struggles with, is expending his hand to take his turns and then having any cards to arsenal to set up next turns. So running the cards that have hit effects to draw cards feels like that's kind of the solution to his hand problem, where sometimes you don't have an arsenal. You play with a clean arsenal too much, where you're not able to get a card down and threaten these bigger turns. And obviously you don't know what you're drawing, and that can create an issue in and of itself. You could draw a card that you don't want to arsenal, but more often than not, any card is good to arsenal in that strategy, because it's probably a go again card or a buff card. So if you could just help your hand be better, I think there's something to Boltyn there, where you're kind of pacing yourself and tempoing your opponent by saying, I'm going to swing a couple times every turn. One of them is probably going to have go again, and one of them's more than likely going to have an on-hit effect. And then eventually I'm going to have a turn where I, via the Vanguard, a massive 3 or 4 wide turn, and they're all going to be 5 to 7 attacks.
Yeah. So that is... Sorry, I actually just had a thought. I need to run it by you after this. But
Yeah.
Important to note that if you do play a take flight and charge, that turns on your engulfing lights and stuff for the rest of the turn. Like you don't need to charge when you play that card in order to get that card's effect. That card will, like engulfing light just says if you've charged this turn. So if you've got that go again from the take flight, you charge, go again into your engulfing light, you fulfill that requirement. So now it's a on hit draw effect with only still charging that one card from hand. So like if you can back to back those types of cards, not have to expend the soul, build up that soul as well, I feel like he is accomplishing a lot, which is nice.
I think the key to things like engulfing light too is that's like that's the perfect card to run blues and yellows in, because I think the thing sometimes people don't think about is they want to run like the 4 attack because that's the break point on a card like that. But I think on a card like that has an on hit effect, sometimes the 1 or the 2 is just as bad, if not worse, because when somebody drops a free 1 and says, if you let this hit, I draw a card, that's almost worse than if it was a 4, because you're like, God, now like I was going to block the 4 to not take damage. So I'll give you 2 cards instead of 1, but now I have to give you a card to not let you draw a card. So basically the net is the same. Either I go +1 or you go -1 in order to stop the draw effect. And either way, you're creating a better next turn for yourself, because your opponent either is attacking you with less cards, or you're going to have a card in arsenal, meaning that you probably have a better turn lined up. And I think that's the key. Is I think there's something there with Bolton. I think he might actually be one of the harder ones to solve as far as like building a really finely tuned deck, because what he's trying to accomplish is kind of fighting itself a little bit. Like you need cards in hand to charge, you need ways to buff your weapons. Like you end up with these like 2 conflicting strategies trying to do one thing in a deck. And it's kind of the issue that Viserai has sometimes, where like you just draw all non-attack actions or you draw all attack actions, and you're not triggering, you're not doing the thing that he needs to do to accomplish his game state, which is non-attack, attack, creating rune chance, and then either building them all up for 1 or popping them off regularly to kind of constantly play mid-range.
Oh yeah, 100%. So speaking of that, Chain, has Jason tested Bloodsheath Skeleton at all on Chain?
No, I don't think so.
Because all you need to do is make the 1 rune chant, and it discounts your next 2 cards by 1 each, right? And it blocks for 2.
Yeah, your next non-attack and your attack.
Discount. I don't know how many 1 costs typically get ran in that, or if it's ever worth it, or if he runs just a ton of zeros.
Yeah, I mean, I think the issue is you don't have any real big scary attacks, and then the one thing that you do run, like Soul Reaping, you effectively make free anyway. Like you make it actually a you basically pitch cards for it, but you're banishing them to create value.
Sorry, that was just like a one-off thought I just had. That wasn't my thought that I wanted to bring up later though, because I did have this thought. You remember when we were testing, and I had the Luminaris Dominaria or whatever the hell it is, like the one Bolton specialization where it's like
Lumina Ascension.
Yes, that one. Yep. So Lumina Ascension and also via the Vanguard, and I was like, oh, you can't chain these. Is that? This is probably just going to make the comments unbearable to read, because people are going to be like, you're an idiot. But is that an example of where I could play the V of the Vanguard, hold priority, play the Lumina Ascension, and then since I had charged as part of its cost and not part of its resolve effect, when I play the Lumina Ascension, I fulfill the have charge this turn requirement. It would resolve top to back, and then I wouldn't break the chain as I went forward.
I don't know. I get conceptually what you're doing. I mean, I think the easiest thing to do with Lumina Ascension is just like play Take Flight or Express Lightning into it, and then Snapdragon's the Express Lightning or something. Yeah, because that's that basically gets you what you need to get.
I was just thinking about that one play though, like
the buff with the V.
Yeah, because I was like, if there was a way, because the issue was when we were testing that is that I thought that I realized that you can't break your combat chain. Otherwise, you don't get the buffs on the
Yeah.
rest of your attacks. Because if you were to play the Lumina Ascension, then it breaks that chain.
Breaks the chain. I think that the play with Lumina. I actually think the most broken play with Lumina might be the Sabers build, because in the Sabers build you're able to play the Lumina Ascension. Yeah, so you can with the Courage paired with Lumina, and then if you run Snapdragons and then either Express Lightning, Take Flight, anything that charges, if you run Snapdragons in the list instead of Refraction Bolters, you're able to get a charge in, so that way the Lumina Ascension triggers, and then if the Lumina Ascension triggers and you're able to use the Courage, you just keep swinging away for free and everything gets your buffs. And then it because of the Sabers wording, it creates that still weird thing where they can actually get multiple buffs off of the attack actions being like blocking with attack actions, because Bolton has it. And the Sabers get it. So like the Sabers can really like mess with people, where not only do you get the Bolton buff on that specific attack, but the Sabers retain it for the turn. So if somebody blocks the same Saber twice with an attack action, it effectively gets +2 on the second one.
Oh, +4, right?
Because
it would be 2 for each block.
Yeah. You would get So it would just like everything stacks and really like messes with the math. But again, I think that becomes one of those issues where that's a really, really successful strategy in Blitz, because you're playing for a turn. You're playing for your Lumina Ascension turn, and that's what you're doing, because then you can use Courage. The problem is like Courage over the course of a game isn't as good as Tunic in a constructed build, because you just can't overvalue the fact that it's 1 every 3 turns, and you're typically going to play enough turns that it matters, because like you swinging 4 times means you think the game's not going to go 12 turns, like with Tunic, and that becomes the issue. Like Courage, obviously breaking it is good and getting the free swings, but Courage also only blocks for 2 if you use it in constructed. If you want to use the effect, it doesn't block for 3 because the third is a temper block, so it's like a panic block. And so it just kind of becomes weird. Like it only outblocks Tunic by 1. It's not outvalued. It's just, I don't know. That's the issue, is like Bolton feels like a strategy that's going to be really good in Blitz, but maybe kind of be just good in constructed. Like he kind of has that feel of like that Kano Viserai OTK feel, where like he's going to have a really strong strategy because of like the turn that he can create in Blitz, but he's going to kind of just not have that same gas over the course of 40 health.
He feels like a more methodical Dorinthia. Like doesn't really have like that explosive like 3 swing turn or anything, or does, but in between that big turn, it's pretty mellow. Like you're building soul, you're swinging, you're putting 6 damage with the pressure on him in a turn. Like can't remember the last time I played Dorinthia and was only pressured for 6 if I let things go. You know, it's like the only time is like when I way overblocked the first swing and they're like, cool, I took your hand, we'll pass turn. It's like, God damn it. So I think that's the last time that I took less than 6 damage.
Dorinthia, I think good constructed decks are like consistent pressure every turn.
Yeah.
And a deck like Bolton,
not necessarily, but I know what you're saying.
Yeah. Because even
Bravo's not consistent pressure every. Well, yeah, it is, I guess, with the hammer.
I mean, he's hammer for 6 basically every turn.
Yeah.
I mean, like most decks, I think that's the thing, is like most decks in constructed are built more to do that, like consistent 5 and 6, 5 and 6, 5 and 6. Those turns are the in between turns to these big monster turns where they just put you away. But then those in between turns can also get really out of hand if you just miss something, right? Like the number one way to lose in constructed to Bravo is him going hammer for 6, 2 floating, and you going, you know what, I'll take the 6, and they go, cool, take 10, and it's like, oh, cool, 25% of my health is gone in instant. It's same with Dorinthia, right? You're like, swing for 3, take it, cool, pop bolters. It's like, okay, swing for 3. I'll take it. And you're like, cool, I'll use my last floating resources and I'll double out for blood so you could take 9. Now you took 12 on a turn, and all of a sudden you're like, that spiraled really fast. And like Bolton doesn't have the feel. He feels like one of those decks where you could just be like, cool, I'll take the 2. And they're like, oh.
All right, I'll pass.
Yeah, like, I can't give it go again. I have nothing.
Yeah,
I pass.
Cool. I mean, that might be too. That might just be something that gets solved Like the
Yeah,
people will figure
yeah.
it out. And
Yep.
I'm gonna keep messing with the list. I feel my Prism list is definitely still not there. I'm sure Jason feels the same way about his chain list. Levia, I like my Levia list. I think I'm kind of okay with where it's at. I don't plan on doing a whole ton of tweaking with it. I like just the really high volume of banish 3 cards that I've got, because I feel like I never take blood debt, but also it's risky late game. But I think Bolted's probably my next experiment for Classic Constructed. So
Yeah.
we'll get there.
I think Bolton and Levi, I think we've hit the point with Prism and Chain where it's adjusting a few cards here and there. Like we need to, the deck is at a point where it needs to be played 3 or 4 times before you can change something. And then when you change something, you need to play it 3 to 5 more times before you can change something again. And that's a place where like that's just like the long haul testing that you do with the deck. Whereas like Levia and Bolton are probably ready for, we're getting close to 1.0s, which I think is good. I think we've got some ideas. We're learning what the decks want to do. Now we just have to find kind of the right mix of attacks and things like that to make them good.
Shout out to who was it that had the good comment? That guy certified. He brought up like the glisten thing. And that is a card that I tested quite a bit in the Prism, but I think re-looking at it now that I've got the list where it is now is probably worth it in yellow. I'm not running the 9 because that sounds like insanity. Like, power to you. Just like I'm not blocking anything. That's fine. I do love the 3 blocks and all the heralds. That's fantastic. And that's predominantly one of the reasons that I run that, because it lets you play like that defensive fatigue game, that control game. So but I think 3, there's something to like the 2 or 3 yellow glistens just to make them really want to target your auras when you want them to.
Yeah.
The thing is that like I feel like I never have more than like 2 or 3 auras anyways, unless the game's really steamrolled and it's just kind of the way it is. At that point, I don't really care for if I'm swinging at you with a 1 or a 2. Doesn't matter one way or another. But I don't know. I think it's probably worth looking at and testing, but gonna check that out. So
it could be something to the idea that like late game, if you can keep a couple spectral shields or auras, and if you have like 2 spectral shields and a couple auras out because they couldn't pop them for some reason, there's something to the fact that throwing a couple +1 counters on things and having Ode to Wrath, where now it's swinging 2 with another one behind it, swinging 2 with another one behind it, starts to really eat and chip at their life total. Like that extra 1 from Ode to Wrath is really frustrating. So maybe a glisten in the back end of the game, if you can pitch it early and pop it off, has some legs to it, I think. But I think you definitely have to be careful about the volume of them, because in some matchups they're going to be one of those cards that you see and you just go, oh God. Oh God. Because I'm telling you right now, if you see 2 or 3 no block cards into Dorinthia, and Dorinthia has even a decent hand, just roll your mat up, put it in a tube, because it's going to get out of hand real fast.
I will say one of my favorite plays, or one of the favorite head games when I was running the glistens, was the buff up the aura that doesn't really do much. And it's like, okay, do you want to get rid of like this free 4 attack that I'm going to have, or 5 attack that I'm going to have? Or do you want to get rid of my Genesis? Or do you want to swing at me and get rid of my 3 prismatic shields? It's a because I'm not going to make it an easy choice for you anymore. And that is something that like I do think like the I only want to call it glisten.
Listen, yeah.
That's one of the benefits of glisten, is like it just lets you further your mind games that you're playing with people, which is super fun.
Yeah, and there's something to be said for the fact that it's an instant, right? Late, it becomes almost like an attack reaction, like what Dorinthia does. Like there's those moments playing into Dorinthia where late game you're like, okay, if I block this, it's possible they go over it anyway, and I have no turn. If I don't block it and they don't have that +3, then I go to next turn and I actually have a hand. Maybe I can put pressure back and I can grab the tempo. And sometimes you have to risk it. And playing like the yellow glisten where it's like 3 counters, there is something to be said for the fact that you can just go aura for 1 and they go, yeah, I'll take it. And you're like aura for 1 and they keep taking it, and then aura for 1 and they go, you just
I gotta block this one, and then you're like, psych, +3 counters on it.
Instant +3. Now you take 3 and you die. GG's.
How come he's not swinging with that? Not Merciful Retribution. What's the other one? The
Odor Wrath?
Not Odor Wrath. The one that -1's the attack. God, I'm spacing on it. Yeah, I know. I gotta remember this stuff.
You can see the art.
I know, but like, how come he's not swinging with that one? He swung with all the shields and stuff first, then you swing with that, and you're like, I'm gonna buff this so that you also want to attack this not super important aura. Let's go. Yeah, I am excited to play Glisten again. So good shout out. That's the type of stuff I like to see when people are giving feedback. So
yeah, I think Prism is good. I think Prism is going to be one of those lists that is slowly refined. I know Chain Jason has been continuing to mess with, and one of the biggest things that we've messed with Chain is like trying to find the right balance of blood debts. It's interesting because it's almost like the Bravo Blues, right? Like, you know, it's like 40 blue Bravo. Like, you got to play your 40 blues in your constructed list, and when you're sideboarding, you can't go under 40, because if you go under 40, you're going to brick multiple times. So it's interesting because I feel like Chain's going to have a number that people kind of find where it's like, if you're playing a 60 card list, you got to have 32 blood debts, or you got to have, like, there's going to be a number that's going to mathematically be the right number to play. And I think that's kind of what we're refining with Chain right now. Is the cost curve feels good, the cards feel good, but what's the right number of blood debt to make sure that mid to late game you're hitting consistently and just being able to blow people out in those big turns?
Someone's done that mental math. Someone is Rain Man that.
I mean, to be fair, like, I think there are people who are going to do the math on it, but then there's also like something to be said for like the feel of it, right? You know, you gotta feel it in your gut. Like, is this the right number? Do I feel it?
My nuggets. Yeah, dude, like, I'm with you.
Yeah,
dude, we just watched that movie Surf's Up with the kids. That's such an underrated animated movie. I love it. If you haven't seen Surf's Up, check it out. It's about penguins.
There are a lot of those. There are a lot of those.
Yeah. Good adult humor in that one.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's basically we're just chipping into 40 minutes here, so we can basically wrap it up unless you have more thoughts about like the meta, what you want to talk about. And right now we're still just testing. We've got more of the 1.0 series that'll be coming out. I think Jason's actually spearheading. Jason said that he was going to take Levia, right?
Yeah, he played Bolton and he basically wanted to kill himself. So I think he kind of he was like, going to take Bolton. I don't want to play this deck. Yeah.
I'm going to take Bolton, and yeah, it definitely was not his play style. So that's fair.
No, that's you definitely. It's interesting how in this game some people are very play style oriented, and they play better, they feel better, they seem like they're just more comfortable in a specific play style, and other people could kind of like play whatever, you know, like that. It's interesting how different people function in different ways. And Jason very much has a play style, and when you put him on a deck in his play style, he just like will get it to the point where it's just obnoxious because it's so efficient and he runs it so well. But like when you put him on something that's not his play style, he's just like mentally he just checks out. Like turn 2, he's like, I don't even know, I'm gonna do this thing because whatever, play this card.
Yeah,
you're just like, wait, aren't you gonna die if you do that? Like, I don't care.
I would rather die and have this be over than continue this.
Like, you could scoop. I'm not going to scoop, but I will let myself die.
I think it was funny too, because just like looking at the list that he was running, I was like, oh yeah, for sure, not like something that he's familiar with. It was put together like someone who doesn't play like that warrior-esque, which is funny because like he played Dorinthia a little bit, but.
He did, but I think he like in his heart deep down, he's never been able to play Dorinthia because Beth beat him so miserably at the beginning. True. Like when the game first started, like when we first started playing, all we ever heard was like, just beat my ass again, man. I can't beat Dorinthia. Like, she keeps beating me. Like, no matter what he played, he couldn't beat Dorinthia. And I think deep down in his soul, he's just like, I don't want to play warrior. And there's too many. It's like warrior. the gifts where he's just like the dog. It's like, and like all the flashbacks are happening behind him. That's Jason. He's like, I'll put Dorinthia. And as soon as he sets her in the hero thing, he's just like, "Ugh," and it's just like the flashbacks happen. And Beth's like, reprise for 3. He's like, oh no, it's happening again.
Oh, just getting touched in his no square. Yeah, that's good stuff. All right, well, be on the lookout for those 1.0 videos. Make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't, and you want to just check out our audio version. You can listen to the audio version without having to have YouTube open or whatever. Like I like falling asleep to stuff, but whatever it is, you can check us out at all of the podcast sites that are on the video display. And be sure to hit that bell notification, because you will get notified whenever we do come out with new videos. We are upping our video output, and it seems to be getting a really good response. So I think we're going to keep that up. We went between sets at the end of last meta. We were kind of down to just the podcast, just the Tuesday night live stream with maybe a video splashed here or there. But now there's like a bunch of new stuff to look at and new testing to have happen. Like we're all for pumping out all the content. So be sure to like and subscribe. Again, really appreciate all of the feedback in the comments, and look forward to chatting with you guys next video. Peace.